You may frown, but that won't stop me from saying that violence is an intrinsic part of human nature, and thus another of its pillars. Our reasons for using violence are essentially the same as those of animals that mark their territory and attack anyone else who ventures into it. These reactions are yet another manifestation of the survival instinct. This same instinct leads people to mark territory, to protect their hunting or planting grounds, and call them a nation. Next, they take a flag as their symbol, then kill and die for it. Violence in the form of war has always been the cause of the rise and fall of empires and societies throughout history, and even in our time. Victories against Carthage in the Punic Wars turned the Roman Republic into the greatest power of its age. The Napoleonic Wars ended the Spanish Empire and enshrined the United Kingdom as the greatest power. World War I ended the Austro-Hungarian and Ottoman empires, starting the North American era, but sharing it with the British. And World War II ended the British Empire and confirmed the United States as the greatest world power, together with the Soviet Union. In the tribal era, wars were ended with a few hundred dead. 2,000 years ago, thousands died in each battle, and the civilized 20th century saw tens of millions of people killed. In collegiate terms, we could cynically state that humanity is progressing adequately. So, in the next step, thanks to this progress and developments in military technology, we will be able to count the dead and injured in future wars by the hundreds of millions, if we don't fix things before that. This clearly demonstrates the need for a global political power to control those weapons. Violence is such a powerful part of our nature that despite the efforts of government leaders, teachers and journalists to convince us otherwise, it is the foundation of any political legitimacy, and thus the origin of nations and their corresponding states. Let's look at a few examples. These are only illustrative, but they apply to all cases. The United States became the nation it is today through two wars that left hundreds of thousands dead: the Revolutionary War and the Civil War. Its origin and legitimacy are based on those victories. The Soviet Union emerged from a civil war between the whites and the reds, although it was later disguised by the fiction of the October Revolution. In reality, this was no more than a coup d'etat by a political party that had actually lost the elections to the Duma. Modern-day China was born from a civil war between communists and nationalists. European countries have risen and fallen based on war for hundreds of years. In all cases, it is the victors who have ended up in power, and the first thing they do with that power is try to make everyone forget their violent origins and establish their legitimacy based on the unambiguous will of the people or on religion. To achieve this, they shamelessly distort history through the education system and the media. This all leads to the conclusion that power always comes from violence in every human society. And if we want to understand ourselves as we really are, and not as we say or wish we were, we have to accept this reality. Once we accept it, we can start looking for the most effective possible solution for avoiding the negative aspects of this human characteristic. It is clear that the only way to avoid the enormous risks currently presented by violence in the form of war, if we want to learn from history, is to head rapidly towards some kind of union of all the countries on Earth. If we cannot take this essential step in our evolution, it will not be long before human society suffers irreparable damage, as science has created destructive technology that is only becoming more difficult for us to control. In summary, violence is a pillar that has supported and is supporting our society. But it is a pillar of jelly, putting us at greater individual and collective risk every day and always causing deep misery and anxiety.
Yo me iré, estaré solo y sin árbol, y yo me iré, mas yo no sé hasta cuándo me perderé. Por aquel rincón de mi huerto me alejaré, como aquel barco en el puerto.
I want to start by saying that birth is not the beginning of everything. It is only the continuation. And when we die, that is not the end of anything. It is only a new start. Let me explain. We have learned through nanotechnology that the smallest particles that make up our bodies are identical to the particles that make up the stars, a stone or a tree. We also know that these particles are not destroyed, only organized and transformed into new materials. The ones that currently make up any person's body were previously part of something else and will be part of yet another thing in future, and so on ad infinitum. And in future, when our planet has disappeared, each of our current particles will recombine and continue to exist, forming part of some element of the cosmos. For this reason, and to be accurate, we can conclude that what we call death is nothing but a property of what we know as life. That is, only that which is born dies. This is obvious. But even if it doesn't seem that way to us, death really only means the end of the combination of conscious matter that we are now, before we become new types of matter later on. We become human beings when we are born, and after death we become dust that is scattered throughout the universe, being reborn in other forms in a continuous exchange of matter and energy. However, our fear of death is logical, as it is nothing more than yet another manifestation of the survival instinct and a characteristic associated with the animal kingdom. That fear is so important in our culture that it is a huge part of it in the form of religion, architecture, literature, etc., with a huge influence on every human civilization. In summary, birth, life and death are only transformations of the same cosmos that we are part of. After death, our current molecular structure will transform and fuse with other elements. Since the dawn of time, people have wanted to know who they are and what their role in the universe is. Each religion tries to answer these questions according to its own conventions, but almost always involving one common factor: God. Who created everything that exists? What are we doing here? What is death? Is there anything after it? It is precisely the need to answer these questions that led humanity to create God. Each religion, with a greater or lesser dose of fantasy then, describes one or another kind of God, as well as the place we will supposedly go to, depending on how well we behave in life. Religions clearly provide positive aspects to humanity, particularly when they provide reassurance during moments of deep individual misfortune. because people are very vulnerable at those times and need to cling on to something, even if they're only clutching at straws. Religions make themselves into those straws. However, it is also true that religions have equally caused and continue to cause immeasurable pain by fanaticizing their followers and encouraging them towards self-sacrifice or war. Nevertheless, it seems that science has not found any better answers to the questions we asked above, related to the big questions about our existence. They may be even further than religions from reaching a believable answer. Let's take a look. We know that we live in a completely unfathomable universe, and that every day the new devices we invent show us incomprehensible phenomena that seem to demonstrate that we know less and less about the world we live in, as every scientific theory that we develop to explain them ends up failing sooner or later and has to be replaced with another one. In fact, when we stare in wonder at the universe or the quantum world, 1,000 questions leap to our limited but curious minds. For example, how can intelligent beings exist without another superior intelligence having created them? Can we accept that combinations of elemental particles formed by random chance have created everything that exists? We sense that something or someone must have combined those elements in order for anything to exist. It is this something or someone that religions call God, and that science, which also has no answer, has no name for. It creates theories which are inevitably limited by our intellectual capacity. Each theory is more or less successful, as it is accepted by more or fewer scientists, which does not mean that it is true. We should remember, for example, that when Einstein published his famous theory of relativity, most physicists said that it was a very imaginative but unrealistic story. Meanwhile, it is widely accepted today, despite the fact that it has been proven not to work in the quantum world. This reminds me of an old story that I'm sure you already know, which summarizes this issue well. Once upon a time, a man was walking along a beach when he saw a girl playing at the water's edge. As he got nearer, he saw that she was running up to the sea over and over again, filling a bucket of water, then immediately emptying it into a small hole that she had made in the sand. She did this so many times that the man, overcome with curiosity, approached her to ask, "Hey, what are you doing?" Looking up at him, she replied, "I'm taking all the water out of the sea, and I'm going to put it in this hole." The man exclaimed, "But that's impossible." And the girl replied, "It's more impossible to do what you are trying to do. Trying to understand the mystery of God with your tiny mind." Perhaps this could apply to our reality just by replacing God with the universe, as we are certainly incapable of understanding most of the phenomena that we observe in the quantum world and in the cosmos, both of which we are part of. Here, at the end of this journey to explore life, it's time to present the results we found. Getting straight to the point, the first thing we can conclude, without using any flowery phrases, is that it is not possible for anyone to know their purpose in life. However, the amazing and extraordinarily sublime thing for us is that the reasons why we cannot know the meaning of our existence are exactly the things that give it meaning. Let's take a look. We are important insofar as we are the universe, which is irrefutable. This makes us extremely valuable, as we are part of something extraordinary, even if we cannot understand it. None of the structures that our particles form part of will remember what happened to them before. But during our current lives as humans, is there any greater meaning than the certainty that we are the universe, and as eternal as the universe? Of course, it would only be possible to understand the exact purpose of our existence if we knew the purpose of the universe. This is not within the reach of humanity, and we have to accept that, because it is not built on the scale of our imagination, let alone that of our intelligence. We can say that nothing that exists appears at random or due to incoherent chance combinations of elemental particles. That is impossible, because everything would be in chaos, and the universe would never have been able to flourish. Therefore, we can determine that there is an intelligence, of which we are a tiny part, that we cannot perceive or understand due to its size. This is not a theory. It is a fact proven by 1,000 signs, signals, and partial observations of everything we see in the macro and micro universe. This intelligence is what religions call God, divining its existence through pure intuition, which science does not know what to call it because this discipline has too many limitations. On the other hand, we have set out together on this journey to try to understand ourselves, which is essential in order to optimize our life experience. We have seen that there are 7 pillars that emerge from our survival instinct, which we urgently need to manage better. So let's begin with the obvious conclusions. First, there is no heaven or hell after what we call death. Those are inventions of the minorities who want to control everyone else. Second, what we call death is not the end, only another beginning. Third, the universe creates new structures and materials over and over, and the particles that make up our body today will later form part of other elements. Therefore, we will not disappear, only transform into different forms, although these differences mean that there is no continuity of memory between them. So clearly, what we can do during our conscious lives is improve the things we can change with our own hands. The things that depend on us, because we are the ones who created them. That is, those pillars of jelly. Let's do it. To do so, we have to start by promoting a new culture of citizenship. For example, by changing our individual and social mentality. This new mentality must aim for people to demand from their politicians that states should serve their citizens and not the other way around. That governments should not have the power to declare war under any circumstances. That our leaders be evaluated based on the economic and social prosperity they can provide for us, demanding that they promote unity between social groups, rather than strengthening the things that divide us, as we always have more similarities than differences. These new citizens should demand that public authorities not use tax money for military research, but rather for scientific and technological exploration, with the sole aim of improving our conscious lives, eliminating hunger, illness and pain. Only a new type of person, with a new mentality far removed from the anachronistic political philosophies of the left and right, can start to demand this progress for their own good. On the individual level, these new citizens must be able to enjoy, without complexes, which should be their aim in life, the gifts they have received from their natural programming. Love, friendship, sex, pleasure in food, and enjoyment of beauty, of the imagination, of artistic creations, of a sunset or a good conversation. To achieve this, we must try to spend less time as spectators of our own lives and more as their protagonists. The society we have created encourages its citizens to become simple spectators. This is not an innocent act. Spectators are easier to manipulate than those who try to take control of their own lives. Politicians, professors, journalists, historians, religious leaders, novelists and filmmakers are usually the necessary accomplices to this manipulation that politics and religion have always carried out. They are the ones who built our pillars of jelly. Now let's recall in brief what we have seen in this regard along the path that brought us here. We were created as sexual beings, but the way we handle this part of our nature is grotesque. For example, note that we have no qualms about letting children watch war films or westerns where people kill and die. On the other hand, the same film would be classified as unsuitable for minors if a naked human body appeared. I'm sure you will agree that this is worse than stupid. It's ridiculous. Sex was originally a sturdy pillar, but over time, particularly due to the influence of Christianity, it has become a pillar of jelly due to the numerous frustrations and insecurities it creates. This issue is simple to resolve. We just have to reclaim the Roman logic in this regard, as we should also reclaim their understanding of the institution of marriage. Marriage should logically exist as a legal means to provide stability for children, who also, just like the rest of us, did not ask to be born. Their well-being is therefore the responsibility of their parents, as they exist because of their parents' decisions. Unlike sex, love in its varied forms is a very sturdy pillar. As people's level of happiness increases, the more they experience this powerful emotion throughout their lifetimes. Another obvious pillar of jelly, as we saw in the corresponding section, is the current system for our coexistence on Earth. We are organized into more than 200 countries, which creates significant risks for humanity due to the current technologies available for war. The only way to eliminate these huge risks, as we also discussed, is to head towards a United Nations of Earth. What is the point of traveling through space on our beautiful blue planet if we do so while dividing it into tiny plots of land that are in conflict with each other? It is politicians who lead us to war, with journalists as their necessary accomplices, while the media and weapons manufacturers see war as big business. The media are looking for audiences, which they find using huge scandals and dramas. There is no greater drama than war. Also, as we saw in the relevant section, religion and science are of great interest. They sometimes act as sturdy pillars, and at other times, too often, as pillars of jelly. However, it is clear that in some sense the two complement each other and that we need them, since it is very natural that when science has no good answer to people's essential concerns, we take refuge in religious faith, as religions are only limited by the imagination for creating their truths. In contrast, science has to demonstrate its truths empirically, which is usually very difficult and sometimes impossible. We have also been able to understand that the purpose of our lives is connected to the purpose of the universe we are a part of. Even though we don't know what that is, it is reasonable to think that it must be wonderful, worthy of its enormity and amazing complexity. As such, during the stage we call life, we should focus on enjoying the gifts that nature has given us, strengthening the sturdy pillars that raise us above ourselves, but trying to remove or change the pillars of jelly that we have built, as they only lead us to pain and fragility. In conclusion, the meaning of life is not something we can find, but something we create every day based on the possibilities of our intellects, experiencing friendship, love and discoveries, teaching others what we know, learning to coexist and trying to be as happy as possible. One day we will all leave for the stars, which science says is where we came from. But in the meantime, let's make our small world into a better place.
Yo me iré, estaré solo y sin árbol y yo me iré, mas yo no sé hasta cuándo me perderé. Por aquel rincón de mi huerto me alejaré, como aquel barco en el puerto. Esperarás, amor, no sé, volveré tal vez. Esperarás, al final del camino tú esperarás a que nos una el destino. Soñarás y tus sueños y los míos se unirán como barco y marino en alta mar. Y al final, ahí estás del largo camino que ayer pasé. Y ese tren que me alejó y me vuelve a acercar y el primer recuerdo volverá. Deja, mi amor, que el tiempo se pare, que el pasado vuelva a pasar y que en mis noches no me despierte preguntando dónde estarás. Quizás la vida algún día, quizás nos separe, más podrás recordar mi luz, mi fe, mi amor. Esta es tu canción, vívela por ti, por mí. Y yo me iré, pero algún día volveré, como el soldado regresa al hogar, como el recuerdo que se fue